Meeting to order. It is 10:02. We'll begin with adoption of the agenda.
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer. Director Itmeyer. Director Griffin.
Here.
Oh. Director
Tyler
Griffin.
here. Sorry about that.
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next, we'll have public comment on closed session. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on the lines? There are none, so we will now move into closed session. Now move to open session. We'll begin with the report on closed session with Keith Lemieux.
Sure. The board met in closed session to discuss the items identified on the agenda. The board received reports on both items, but no reportable action took place. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you will all stand and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we will have a roll call.
Chairman Hayman,
Present.
Vice Chair Peters,
Present.
Director Itmeyer,
Present.
Director Griffin,
Present.
Director Vallejo.
Okay, moving to item number 6, public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Go
Hello.
ahead, Don.
Good morning, gentlemen and ladies, too. I have a comment about recharge that may be useful for you to hear. Oftentimes, one sees almost an immediate increase in groundwater levels with surface water being present. That sudden jump up is not recharge to the groundwater. It's hydraulic pressure that's resulting from the water that has diffused into the soil to some relatively minor extent. It's not to the groundwater. It may ultimately reach the groundwater, but the effect that you see initially is not technically recharge. So don't get really excited when you see the first bump up. It may continue or it may not. The other aspect of this is that's important that the GA understand. The El Paso Basin is separated from our main basin with a fault which is relatively poorly defined at this point. There's some contradictory evidence of its position. One thing that can be done is shallow seismic studies, and it actually needs to be done all over this valley. The margins of the valley against the Sierras, against the Cosos, where the new wells that Gene Moran is supervising that are up near Rose Valley, all of those areas need a shallow seismic survey. I offer that to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any public comments on the lines? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 7, board member comments. Any comments from the board?
I have one, or actually two comments. I would like to see, I mentioned last month at the meeting, an ad hoc committee be informed for the shallow well mitigation program. I would still like to see that added to our agenda, if we could move forward with that. And then also, I had requested that maybe this be moved to the end of the agenda so we could have board comments after we had our meeting in case there was anything that came up during the meeting that we wanted to discuss about adding to the next agenda. That's it.
Just to clarify, for the shallow well mitigation item, are you talking about like a one-time committee or a standing committee?
I think we should do a standing committee until we came up with a program that we could present to the entire board that was acceptable.
I only asked because you said ad hoc, and I was a little confused
Okay.
which one you meant.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 8, consent agenda. This consists of items 8A, approved minutes of the board meeting March 8th, 2023, and items 8B, approved expenditures. Any member of the board wish to have an item pulled? Any member of the public wish to have an item pulled? Seeing none,
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the board meeting and approve expenditures.
Second.
Chairman Hayman,
aye.
Vice Chair Peters. Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 9, authorized release of a request for proposals to conduct 2022 financial audit. This will be with the General Manager, Carol.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your packet, you have a staff report as well as a proposed request for proposals and a sample agreement. And so what we're looking to do is to go out to bid for our audit services, or at least solicit proposals for audit services for our 2022 calendar year audit services. As you know, I believe Brown Armstrong has performed our audit for the past several years, at least 4 that I'm aware of. And considering, I think the length of time that we've contracted with them, as well as the lengthy process we've been going through with them for the past couple of years to get the audits complete, staff feels it's timely to solicit proposals for a new auditor. And so we have the draft RFP in the packet for your approval, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carol. We'll bring it back to the board for any comments or discussion.
I'm definitely in support of going out to bid for this. I think it's, judging by how they've responded to our last audit, we're definitely needing to look for somebody else. But that being said, where are we, Carol, in getting the report from Brown Armstrong that we already paid them above and beyond what we should have for? Because I'm personally of a mind that we need to bring counsel into this and look at legal remedies if we don't get that immediately.
Understand. And we are told that we should have an audit in May. I don't know if it will be final and ready for our May board meeting, but it's our understanding that we will at least have a draft. And I know I've given you false hope in the past, so I'm hoping that what they're telling us is accurate. We have not paid them, by the way, what was approved to be paid. So we've been holding that. We have the invoice, but we've been holding payment until we actually receive the audit. We feel that's the least that they could do, is provide the audit before we give them any additional payment.
Okay, thank you. Well, obviously, I'd like to hear from the other board members, but I would like to make a motion that we approve this item with the caveat that we ask our legal counsel to prepare some options for us if we don't have this at the next meeting.
Very good. We'll go ahead and take further comment from the board, and then I'll go to public comment before we act on the motion.
Okay, I would just like to say that I agree with Director Peters. I have concerns about Brown Armstrong's non-performance. I see it is impacting the GA. I know the district has been requesting a copy of the audit, and we have not got it. So if we need to move forward with legal, I think that's what we need to do also. I agree.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Okay, and I would just like to concur that with the past history of Brown Armstrong and the delays and the additional fees, I think everybody's pretty much in agreement that we need to move forward on getting a new auditor and then pursue any actions we need to take to get the audit from Brown and Armstrong for the previous year. But all right, so we'll move to public comment. Any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, any public comment from the phones? None, so we'll bring it back. We have a motion, and
I will second.
we have a second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 10, grant easement with United States Navy for installation of telemetry equipment. This will be with Steve Johnson and I believe Gene Moran.
Yes, excuse me. Good morning, everybody. Good to be back here, back at the board meeting. Yes, I don't know if Jean is there. She's physically there to talk about the need for this easement. I don't know if Carol, you wanted to do a little intro and then have Jean follow up, or if there's any questions.
Oh, no, I just go ahead. I don't think I have anything introductory for you.
Okay, then Jean, could you just present what we have for the board?
Yes, I will. Good morning, Board. This agenda item has been reported to you over the last year and a half, roughly. This is a grant easement that the Navy needed to put together. We have Prop 1 funding. DWR paid for this real estate easement, which was about $20,500. And how this works is that we have 10 to 12 key monitoring wells that we used in the GSP. And in each of those wells, we have put telemetry equipment in. 5 of those wells are on the Navy base. And given the nature of the retrofit on the top of the well casing with this telemetry equipment and data loggers, it required an easement from the Navy. The Navy has put together the whole package. It is fairly extensive, and you see it in your packet. With signing this agreement, they have waived any kind of annual fees for us. But this will be, I believe it's a 20-year. I'd have to check. I apologize that I don't know exactly how many years this lease is for, but all the equipment is inside the wells. We recommend that the board authorize the general manager to sign this Navy real estate outgrant easement. If you have any questions, I can take any questions.
Thank you, Gene. We'll bring it back to the board for any questions. Okay, I don't think we have any questions, so thank you very much. We'll bring it back for public comment. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, any public comment on the phones? There is none, so we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving to item number 11. Approval of reimbursement agreement with the Bureau of Land Management for assistance permitting for imported water pipeline. This will be with Steve and I believe Bianca.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, actually, Jeff Helsley and Bianca have been working, and some other staff people certainly have been working on this item and the next one. Jeff is actually covering for me on a strategic planning meeting at one of our local water district boards down here. So Bianca is solo right now, and Bianca will make just a short presentation on this BLM reimbursement agreement. Go ahead, Bianca.
Okay. Hello, members of the board and the public. Can you guys hear me? I just wanted to make sure.
We can hear.
Perfect. Okay. So for just some background, the GA was awarded $7.6 million from the Sigma IP grant, which will be primarily used on the imported water interconnection project. On the February 8th, 2023 meeting, the board authorized the award of contracts for design, environmental compliance, and right-of-way consulting services for the project. A portion of the project is on Bureau of Land Management, or BLM land, and the BLM has determined that an environmental assessment of the project is required to consider issuing a permit to construct the project. These services will be performed by Provost and Pritchard, who are our contractors for environmental compliance. The BLM requires an agreement on the process that will be followed to prepare the environmental assessment and to provide cost reimbursement of BLM's related costs, including costs to ensure that the environmental assessment meets the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, processing applications for right-of-way, issuing a right-of-way grant, and monitoring construction, operation, and maintenance of the project on BLM land. The reimbursement agreement includes a baseline estimate of costs of $104,298.84, and the agreement requires reimbursement of BLM's eventual actual costs, an initial deposit of $25,000, and periodic replenishment of the deposited funds to maintain a minimum balance of $5,000. Work under the Sigma IP grant must be completed by March 31st, 2025. So work is proceeding on a very aggressive schedule. In order for us to keep with schedule, the reimbursement agreement is needed to be in place now to allow for the BLM to provide permits for performing soil borings, which are scheduled for July, and environmental surveys and studies along the alignment within BLM land. I do want to make the differentiation that in Agenda Item 12, which I will be addressing next, the notice of exemption is for soil borings on non-federal lands, which is scheduled for mid-April in California City and Kern County. So the reimbursement agreement, which has been reviewed by staff and legal counsel, is included in your board package, and staff recommends the board authorize the general manager to sign the agreement. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Bianca. We'll bring it back to the board for any questions or discussion. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it to the public for public comment. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Any public comment from the phones? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Let's go ahead and take that call before we, so we do have a public comment call that just came in. So caller, go ahead.
Hello, this is Renee Westelusk, and I just have a question regarding the cost of the permitting. Will this permit allow the pipeline permitting on all BLM land that's included in the pipeline plan? Or are we going to have to get other permits along the way with BLM?
Renee, this is Steve. This portion is only a reimbursement agreement with BLM to coordinate issuing of permits. This is not for the permit itself. So yes, we will need permits from BLM wherever we cross BLM land, but this is to reimburse their cost in coordinating and eventually executing those permits.
Okay, so then in the long run, we're going to pay more money for the actual permits on top of this plan we have to pay for, right?
We may or may not. It may be included in these costs, just depends on how much staff time they put on this to use up the money. But all of this will be included in the IP grant that we have, the $7.6 million, which we do need to spend.
Right, I understand. I just wanted to find out how it was going to be paid for long term.
Yeah.
Okay. It's going to all come out of the grant money, the $100,000, $104,000, then for this plan for permitting.
It should, yes. We obviously have to submit it in an application for reimbursement, but it's all part of the project and what's covered under our grant agreement.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, so we have a motion, and I believe we have a second. So we'll go ahead and bring it back for a vote.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itnyer, Director Itnyer, Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Hey, I didn't hear my name.
Director Itnyer,
Aye. It's been kind of fading in and out.
Yeah, it was silent for a minute. We're good.
Okay, moving on to item number 12, approval of resolution 05-23, CEQA notice of exemption for the geotechnical borings for the imported water pipeline design. This will be with Steve Johnson and Bianca again.
This will be Bianca again, just following up. Thank you, Bianca.
Okay, thank you. So again, just want to make the differentiation that the prior item was for borings on BLM land, and this item will be for borings on non-federal lands. To reiterate the background, the GA was awarded $7.6 million from the Sigma IP grant, which we'll be using on the imported water project. And the award of contracts for the design, environmental, and right-of-way services were authorized at the February 8th meeting. And all work under the Sigma IP grant has to be completed by end of March 2025. And so work is on a very aggressive schedule, performing soil borings to obtain geotechnical information and conducting the environmental field surveys and studies needed for environmental evaluation of the project are among the very critical tasks currently being implemented. As mentioned, soil borings in California City and Kern County are scheduled for mid-April. And keeping with this schedule will allow us to then perform the borings on BLM land in July. The soil borings are required at the proposed pump station sites at the Indian Wells Valley Water District's Ridgecrest Heights blending facility and at the trenchless pipeline crossings at major drainages, railroads, and Highway 395. Geotechnical reports will be completed in order to ensure pipeline trench stability and to provide criteria required for the design of structures and pipe foundations. The geotechnical investigation has been determined to be categorically exempt from CEQA for basic data collection to assess soil composition, as the soil borings would not result in a serious or major disturbance to an environmental resource, and activities are strictly for information gathering purposes. Resolution number 523 and the notice of exemption, which has been reviewed by staff and legal counsel, is included in your board package. Upon authorization to file the notice of exemption, staff shall post the notice and submit it to Kern County and the state clearinghouse. And once it's posted, the categorical exemption is subject to potential legal challenge for 35 days. Staff recommends the board adopt the attached resolution. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Bianca. We'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the floor for public comment. Any public comment from the floor? There's none. Any public comment on the phones? And no public comments. We'll bring it back to the board for a motion to adopt the attached resolution number 05-23, finding geotechnical borings for the imported water pipeline design exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and approving the filing and recordation of the notice of exemption.
So moved.
I'll second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving to item number 13, Water Resources Manager Report with Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, hello, everyone. As you've seen in the past, we've consolidated the Water Resources Manager Report into a series of bullet points about covering what we're doing, rather than trying to do PowerPoints for everything. So as part of your packet, it'll be up on the board. I'm going to do this as short as possible, but I am going to at least just walk through a summary or highlights or little briefings on some of the items. And we'll do questions when you're all done. Jean will finish up on the status of her projects, including Rose Valley Drilling, which she's out there doing right now. She's here at the meeting, and so she's in the field right now. And then I'll close with some information on the recent ongoing emergency releases that LADWP is making from the LA Aqueduct into the Indian Wells Valley. And I'll give you an update on that after G. So anyway, to start with, grant funding update. As you know, we've got Prop 1 grants that we're wrapping things up on that we initially got to get started with the GSP and, some of the implementation work. We've got invoices to DWR 15A, 16A, and 17A under the Prop 1. All are under DWR review. They're submitted under the review, totaling about $50,000. So there's about $50,000 we're waiting on under that particular grant. Under Prop 68, which was a subset of Prop 1, we've got invoices 14B, 15B, and 16B. Only 14B and 15B are already been approved. We're just waiting for payment. 16B, which is only about $6,000 under DWR review. So we're looking at about $35,000 there in reimbursement. I'm sorry, yes. Oh, and 17B, which is about $3,000. So we're looking at about $35,000 there. As I mentioned, we're closing out Prop 1 and Prop 68 grant. The final report has been submitted. As far as we know, it's been accepted by DWR. We've submitted our final retention payments, totaling almost $220,000. So they've been submitted to DWR back at the end of February. We are waiting on DWR review and approval of that money, and was another $220,000 we're waiting for. Under the Sigma implementation round 1, which we just talked about some of these agreements and reimbursement agreements and notice of exemption, CEQA stuff, we've got invoice out to DWR covering work from October through December 2022. Requested amount about $333,000 is currently under DWR review. Invoice number 3 will be due at the end of May. We're working on that now. So with the $333,000 I just mentioned and the other money that we have in DWR's hands for review and reimbursement, we've got a total of about $650,000 the authority's waiting on. So everything's been going smooth. I don't expect any hiccups on this. We should be getting these reimbursements periodically as we go forward. Under the Sigma Implementation Round 2 grant, we did submit an application for almost $9 million. We're kind of waiting to hear back from DWR on that after we made some adjustments to the application. We also got the Urban Community Drought Relief update we're doing. We're working on about $10 million under that grant, and we're waiting again for DWR on their review. We resubmitted the application based on their comments, so we're sitting on those. Under the GSP implementation projects, recycled water program, we've reported in the past on the recycled water team that's working on this with the water district, the city, and the groundwater authority. We've successfully collaborated on, I believe, to be a very good documentary report on the recycled water program. The final tech memo was distributed to the working group on April 6th. So once we get comments back from the group, we'll make a presentation to the board and certainly release it to the public. As part of that, you recall we talked about submitting a feasibility study to the Bureau of Reclamation on the recycled water program. Purpose of that was primarily to line the groundwater authority up for future funding from Bureau of Reclamation. The feasibility study was completed. It was actually submitted in early March to USBR. We have received a couple of communications back from USBR indicating initial review of what we submitted meets all the requirements that they need for the feasibility study. Their full review will be done by June. So we are still waiting final review of that work. So that's where we are on recycled water. Imported water project. You recall we, the groundwater authority retained Provost and Pritchard for the review of the preferred alignment for our pipeline, for our imported water pipeline. We had some money left over. We transitioned some of the work that was needed for ongoing work with Provost and Pritchard. They've been working on that, and they are closing out that original agreement with the final report, task 4, which the preferred alignment, and then the final report, which is task 8. So we're closing out that work with Provost and Pritchard. On the actual design services, Provost and Pritchard was retained for that work also. As with the prior work, Provost and Pritchard's doing an excellent job. I'm very impressed with the attention we're getting from Provost and Pritchard. All of their work is accelerated. We're moving as fast as we can. Everybody knows that we currently have a time deadline on expenditure of these funds, so everyone's aware of that. So in the written report, we do provide a bullet points on current work that is going. We also provide a list of things that next steps that we're working on with Provost and Pritchard. And I think at the bottom, the most important is our milestones. We're looking at a preliminary design report by July of this year. That's very important. And to provide a project description by March of 2024 in order for the environmental compliance, CEQA NEPA process to be completed within our timeline. So that's what's going on there. The imported pipeline, the environmental services, notice to proceed was issued March 15th. They've all been authorized to proceed with task 1 through 6. So there is a list of what's going on right now, the work that's been done, and the milestones, again, our next steps and milestones are at the bottom. Milestones, the next step, the milestones include a NEPA compliance for geotechnical borings and environmental surveys within BLM property as a milestone, and then the technical analysis, special studies for March through July 2023. Those will be completed through the environmental consultant. We've also got a contract out for right-of-way services. That notice to proceed was issued in late March. Again, we've listed the coordination work that's been done. There's been regular coordination meetings. I gotta say, we are talking to everyone's talking at least on a weekly basis. We're obtaining all the information for affected landowners. They're working on that. Next step is to continue obtaining rights of entry on these properties. And the next milestone is to have a right-of-way acquisition plan by June of 2024. So that's a huge step because that'll be pipeline alignment and right-of-way needs. The next item we've got on the list is the shallow well mitigation program. Director Griffin mentioned the shallow well mitigation program. I want to report we have completed the work on Stark Street and Heritage. Stark Street is now coordinating with our general manager on reimbursement of the work on the well based on the board approval of a certain cost for the replacement well. We are also, based on direction from the board or the staff, I'm not sure where we got the direct, but we are also, we're releasing, I should say, a brief summary of the board policy on the shallow well identification impact mitigation program. A brief summary of that, along with some specific questions on requesting input from both the PAC and the TAC on the implementation of that approved policy. As you recall, and I know Director Griffin recalls because he was part of the participation, there were a lot of questions about decisions need to be made on how to implement that policy. We finally did get those policies implemented and got board direction on those two applications. But based on the questions that were received, there are still some outstanding questions about implementation of the approved policy. So we are prepared to send that to the PAC and TAC to get further input. The annual report, the actual annual report was submitted to DWR the end of March, before the due date. As far as we know, everything's fine. We have not heard anything back from DWR, which we normally do not. Next item is the miscellaneous items. This is really Gene Moran's area, including update on current well drilling. And we'd love to have a video of the tortoise that walked through the campsite the other day. And maybe we can put it on the website. We'll see. But anyway, Gene, if you'd like to pick up on miscellaneous items.
Thanks, Steve. March was a very big month because in March we did the spring groundwater levels, and those get corrected for barometric pressure, other things, and then we do our storage calculation for the annual report. We were able to collect 100 groundwater levels from 136 wells. And this is all in the outline. This is not slides this time, this is outline. The Navy has a new staff person, Mike Bazan, that is doing the groundwater levels. So through COVID, we were training miscellaneous staff. So this should be our last time of training Navy personnel on collecting the groundwater levels from their wells. And there's 47 wells, which is quite a large area of groundwater levels. So that cost should not be incurred by the GA board next fall. The water resource manager collected groundwater levels at 37 wells, as well as at the Navy wells. We also checked in on all the stream gauges and precip stations to make sure that everything was up and running. And we had a meeting with Navy staff about the groundwater-dependent ecosystem monitoring plan and are continuing to work with them on that. The telemetry equipment, we had hoped we could put it in during March, but we will be putting it in once this agreement has been signed. Thank you for approving it. We should be getting that equipment in either in late April or in May, depending upon base access. The Bureau of Land Management has been working with us on a couple pieces. One is that there are a number, 23 wells, monitoring wells that we have no real access agreements with, and we are putting those in. KCWA has been monitoring these wells since the 1990s, and it's more making sure that we are that we have that all wrapped up. So we're working with them on that piece, and also having a permit for the Inyo well replacement. We are planning on that project plus a number of other projects for requesting COSO Navy funding for with fiscal year 2024. I did speak with the commander, and it's expected that it'll be late April, early May that requests for projects will come out, and at that time we will spearhead getting projects into them. The configuration management plan for the GSP model has been continuing. We are updating the model with, sorry, I lost my page. Sorry about that. We are updating the model with DRI as well as a technical modeling group. We had a meeting on last Thursday, and we were discussing model changes. The discussions are very valuable because the technical group can put in all the different inputs from reviewing technical data last year into this model update. The Rose Valley subflow wells are starting to be drilled. We went out in the field. We've been coordinating with BLM and also a biologist in the field. As Steve said, a tortoise visited the site yesterday. Since then, we have weed whacked our area, hoping to discourage them coming on the site. It is lush green and wildflowers at the moment. When we planned the drilling, it would have been just a clay top kind of setting. So the biologists will be there through today. We're looking at having them train the geologists to do hourly sweeps for the tortoise now that we know that they're in the area. They're attracted to the water, they're attracted to the wildflowers, and they are an endangered species. So we are monitoring for that. We drilled to about 28 feet before we hit a very hard basalt. And we are continuing in that hard basalt. We even had to change drill bits to get through some of it. We were, at the end of last night, about 64 feet. So we are still determining if these are boulders or if this is really a volcanic flow. There are volcanic flows in the area. We're hoping it was a boulder. So we will see, and we will know more as the days go ahead. I sent out a report just before this meeting to the Technical Advisory Committee as well as the group with the cooperative agreement. If you want to be on that list, you can email me. If you want to come to the site, it is, you need to contact me. It is a remote site. We do have a drilling operation happening at that time, and I don't want the drillers to have somebody come on the site if we're not there to have to deal with visitors. So if you want to come to the site, you can call me if you have my phone number, or you can email me and I will respond. There is cell coverage out there, so I will get emails while I'm out there, or texts. And that's my report for the technical side of the data.
Great, thank you, Jean. Great stuff. And those Rose Valley wells are a long time coming. We had, as most of you know, we had multiple hurdles to get past that Jean was able, along with the GA staff, was to get past and actually get those things going. So big steps. So lastly, I'll just give a report. I think there is something in the packet and maybe going up on the screen, but it's certainly available. It'll be available on the website, on the GA website. Back in 2017, when we had a bit of a wet year, LADWP made some emergency releases out of the aqueduct into the Indian Wells Valley. I wasn't a part of that. The Water District, Don Zadiba was participated in that. Somewhere around a couple thousand, 1,100, it's in here somewhere, but a significant amount of water was released. I will say, from what I understand, and we're going to try to get more information if we can, there wasn't much information obtained about where that water went, and we're not able to track it very well. So, understanding it was a very, very wet year, Don Zadiva of the Water District, who has been extremely helpful, very cooperative in working with us, keeping us in the loop on what he's learned, what he knows. Don did reach out to LADWP, and apparently mid-March last year, yes, LADWP did make a decision to make emergency releases off the aqueduct on multiple occasions into the Indian Wells Valley. We've been in several multiple calls and certainly been communicating through email as to the status of these releases, tracking the releases, including flow rates and in the field extent of surface water flow. So we're keeping track of those. In one of our first coordination calls, which is a part of this this little briefing, which is basically just chronologically what's been going on. And that's what I basically used to prepare this, were emails back and forth between us and the Water District with Don to put this together. I did have Don proof it, so Don has seen this. I think Don is watching, but I know he's not a participant. But Don, as you know, I mentioned to you before, I welcome your input, any updates or anything that needs to be corrected on what I'm reporting. So we are keeping track of the releases. And one of our first coordination calls, we agreed to prepare a monitoring plan for the releases, both water level and water quality. And Jean Moran and Nicole, along with help from the Water District and Tim Parker, reviewing that plan. We pretty well finalized that monitoring plan. It includes sampling of the raw water, so we can look for a signature of the raw water and our water quality in our monitoring wells. There's a list of the wells provided in this little briefing on what we're doing, a short briefing on what's in that monitoring plan. So that's being implemented. Gina's working on that. Nicole's working on that. We've moved ahead on trying to coordinate these releases and make sure we monitor them and do the best we can to make them effective. On that light, there was another call that was held with BLM, the Water District and their staff and the Groundwater Authority. BLM expressed some concerns about permitting because we were discussing, along with Don, we were discussing the potential or the need for possibly doing some work out of the field to help channelize the flow and maybe channelize it into an area where it percolates a little better. Maybe some sand berms to hold the water, to build up a little head pressure to help the water percolate. So some concerns were expressed about whether permitting might be needed for that work. It looks like they probably will, and we are working on that with the Water District right now. To my knowledge, the Water District is more than willing to help us, not only get permitting, but also possibly do the field work, whatever we can get permitted to help make this an effective replenishment of these emergency flows. To what we understand right now, obviously LADWP doesn't come and talk to us or get our approval. LADWP are making these releases as emergency releases. We're not really clear what, and maybe Don knows more about it at this point, but to my knowledge, we don't really know what they've done to declare emergency, or whether they've gotten city council approval, or whether they've gotten any permitting for emergency. But they're making the releases, and sometimes the LADWP will do this if it's an emergency. Just make the releases. They're making them. They're continuing. Our work is to keep track of what they're doing, so we can understand what the consequences, what the benefits are, hopefully, and the consequences are, and to possibly, as I mentioned on the field work, to possibly make them more effective and get as much effective recharge out of this as we can. That's part of the permitting process, and we will report back on a regular basis on how that is going. So that's one of the issues, is permitting. Another issue came up, which had to do with the base. We were contacted by either the commander or somebody on the base about their knowledge of these releases. Understand they're not our releases. They're LADWP emergency releases, so we don't control them. We are trying to make them more effective, but there's a concern at the base regarding where this water might go. And then if it heads to the playa, it could end up some high water, rising groundwater, possibly saturation, could possibly have negative impacts on settlement or problems with their snort program out there. You know, with very, very high technical and it can't be messed with too much. So we did get that inquiry from the base. Our response to the base were that we've got a monitoring program in place. We don't expect to see water in our monitoring wells for some period of time, but we'll keep them in the loop on where we see the water. Our monitoring wells are clearly between the point of discharge and potential replenishment and where the playa is. So we've got monitoring wells in between where we're monitoring both water level and water quality to see if we see a trace or a signature of this water, and hopefully we can find something. Great opportunity to learn things about the basin. You don't get opportunities like this very often, and we're certainly trying to take advantage any way we can of these opportunities. So I think that's all I wanted to say. If people have questions or questions come up ongoing, certainly email and ask. I'll just reiterate that this happened in 2017. A significant amount of water was released. I have it on the list. I'm trying to remember. It was a couple thousand acre feet, I believe. But they were not able to, I don't believe they were able to find the water. Did not see a rise in the water levels. I don't know if water quality was done to see if you could see any trace or signature differences. But we certainly hope to get some information this year. That's what I have. I think that's the end of the Water Resources Manager reporting, and I think we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Steve. We'll bring it back to the board for any comments or discussion.
I got a couple of your okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Steve, this is Chuck Griffin. I have a couple comments and questions. Just to go back to further in your report to start with, on the recycled water, you mentioned that you guys had a meeting on April 6th. Do you anticipate that maybe that report will be out before the end of the month so we could look at that prior to the May 10th meeting? We can certainly shoot for that. I don't know exactly. Jeff, my Jeff, who's at the other meeting, he distributed with the committee. I don't know if a deadline was provided for the team to get comments back, but I'll look into it and find out and see if we can't get comments back and get addressed and get it to the board. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. I would just appreciate it if we could look at it. And then to comment on the releases from LADWP. The district is pursuing every avenue that the district can to try to work on a project or several projects that can make this release benefit the valley. We've identified some points you guys will probably see on the map where we would like to do some sand dams and some different things. We have been talking with BLM, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and of course LADWP, and of course we called and spoke with the county. So anything that the district can do to try to get this water to benefit the valley as a whole would be a huge benefit. So we can actually have this benefit us instead of just running out on the playa and evaporating.
Very good. I'd just like to add to that, I'd like to thank the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power too for reaching out to us to for us to be a beneficiary of this water. Any water that we can, like Chuck just said, any water we can get into this valley it's good for the valley. In conjunction with what you just said there, Chuck, and so you're, with what those items that you listed, are working directly with the GA in communication with Steve, and that's what I gathered from Steve's comments earlier, that there's a direct communication going between the water district and the GA, and one of my concerns is with the naval base, with their concerns is that that's a concerted effort on all parties and not left any one person to ensure that there is no complications, that arise out on the naval installation. And so I don't want it to be, fall on just the water district or the GA, but I think as long as we stay in a solid communication with all the parties, that we can work through and address those issues.
Yes, and I understand what you're saying. I agree. Anything that the district does or moves forward with, we're obviously keeping Mr. Johnson in the loop, notifying him immediately, and he's definitely in the loop continually to make sure that we're working with him to let him know exactly what's going on and how we're proceeding.
Okay.
And we're trying as fast as we can to work with BLM to see if we can avoid some of the permitting processes or move through to get it started so we're not taking more time to lose the benefit of the water coming in on the permitting process. If we can get that water percolating now, it's better than just flowing down a wash. And hopefully it's coming down an alluvial fan and we're getting a little bit of penetration, but if we can let it sit there, it'd be better.
Very good. Steve, I did have a question for you in regards to the Sigma DWR Round 2 grant for the $8.9 million. Do we have a rough time frame or estimate that DWR will be acting on that?
I don't think we do.
We can't hear you, Steve.
I'm on mute.
Hi, Steve.
I got mumbling. Go ahead, Carol.
I've heard that DWR expects to have some preliminary award information by the summer.
Okay.
Very good. Perfect. Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay, we'll bring it to the public for public comment. Any public comment from the floor?
Steve, this is Dave Janis, PAC Chair. As PAC Chair, you're aware that I had been coordinating with staff to potentially have tasking related to the shallow well mitigation plan. I think you mentioned in your report on the implementation, GSP implementation progress, or with regards to the shallow well mitigation, that you had a document prepared now. Can we expect, and I guess the question is also for Carol related to this, can we expect tasking for our meeting 2 weeks from tomorrow that includes that?
I think so. I've given it, we've sent it to GA staff for review to see if it's complete. I know that some people have reviewed it, and we certainly want legal to look at it first. But I would hope this week we'll get it to you to distribute to your committee.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got, by the way, we have 6 PAC members in attendance in the chamber here and a couple online as well.
Good.
Awesome.
Okay. Public comment from the floor. Go ahead.
Do I only have 3 minutes?
Correct.
Okay, I'll have to go fast. You can find what I'm about to say on roadrunner395.com. I just posted it. The title is California's Eminent Scholar and Historian, Victor Davis Hanson, explains how climate alarmists are giving you the finger with water. I'm going to have to read fast. Inyo County in Owens Lake, California, April 12, 2023. We'll use this date and location as a waypoint on California's suicidal road to ruin. We're almost to our destination, that's hell on earth. To quote Victor Davis Hanson in a recent article, Fiddling America Away, we fixate only on the irrelevant that we think we can address while ignoring the existential we know we can no longer solve. California's global fascist Nazis know that if you can control water and energy, you can control California's economy and make big bucks in the process. Sigma solves nothing, and it certainly has nothing to do with sustainability of groundwater. Do you trust the settled science of the climate alarmists? And aren't they more appropriately called climate fascists? The media aren't asking Gavin Newsom how much money he lost when SVB failed Silicon Valley Bank. But we'd like to know how much more money he and his fascist cronies made leading up to the collapse of his scum-laden bank, and how much they're making on the war on your energy and water supplies. We know a lot about fascism. We have plenty of it in the city of Ridgecrest. You've all been lied to for so many years that you actually believe the bullshit that climate change is caused by humans and cows. It's not. Climate alarmism is fear porn, and it's being used to restrict your use of oil, gas, energy, and water. All of you are complicit in these crimes, and they are crimes. RGS can go back to Santa Barbara and tell Al Gore to suck on it. The Groundwater Authority is the end result of what Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum calls stakeholder capitalism. You are all making money the old-fashioned way. You're stealing it, along with our water. It's not capitalism. and it's certainly not democratic in any sense of the word. It's pure fascism, and we will own nothing and be happy, or so we're told. The fascists are at the trough. The game is rigged, and the speculators in California's water wars are making a killing. If that's not enough, today's California Indian tribes are meeting in Sacramento to discuss water issues. And I won't be able to finish. So I'll leave it at this. To Mr. F. Baum at the Groundwater Authority, this finger's for you.
Any other public comment from the floor? Seeing none, we'll move to the phones. Okay, no public comment there. Okay. Moving on to item number 14, the General Manager's Report. This will be with Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The monthly financials through the end of March are in your packet for your review. If you have any questions, please let me know. We also have in your packet the monthly report from Capital Core Group, and they've been very busy helping us with a number of different activities. They're, of course, helping us finalize our water rights purchase. They are assisting us with our interconnection pipeline project, both locally and in seeking funding and support. And they're also working on reviewing several pieces of California state legislation for us. But I wanted to ask Jeff Simonetti, I don't think Michael McKinney's on, but I would ask Jeff Simonetti to give some highlights of the trip to Washington, D.C. that some of you took earlier this month. It sounded like it was I was disappointed I couldn't join you because of family health issues, but it sounds like it was a great trip. So Jeff, are you able to give us some highlights?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Jeff Simonetti with the Capital Core Group. We were able to have a set of meetings, and Chair Heyman as well as Vice Chair Peters joined us, as well as Ridgecrest City Manager Ron Strand. We were able to meet with a whole bunch of our legislators, including our entire local delegation, both senators' offices from California, as well as some of the folks over at the Navy, and some of the other folks as well on a few committees of jurisdiction. We were able to talk specifically about our request associated with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which continues to move forward. And we're actually going to be having meetings here in this week moving forward that request. And we're able to talk about our request as well with the Water Resources Development Act moving forward. And we'll continue coordination with that. So just want to thank the Groundwater Authority's support. It certainly is very helpful when you have the elected officials who are on the board representing there coming back to Washington, D.C. with us. And it was certainly a successful trip and continue to move that forward.
Thank you, Jeff. And then last, I just wanted to ask, Director Griffin had mentioned a couple of points. And he had also mentioned them last month. I didn't want to appear that staff was ignoring his request, so I just wanted to get some clarification because I didn't hear board consensus or direction. So I just want some clarification, please, on moving the board member comments. I know when Director Peters was chairman, he had specifically asked that we move that up in the agenda, so that's why it's there. Just looking to see, do we have consensus to move that to the end of the agenda, or does the board wish to leave it where it is? Also asking for clarification on the request for the committee to review shallow well applications, and if it's for applications or if it's just for policy review. I wasn't clear on that, and whether or not the board wished to take any action on that. Just want to make sure we take care of these housekeeping points.
Thank you, Carol. Why don't we start with the public comment possibility of moving? So I can just start out by saying I think it's fine where it's at. I don't see any benefit to moving it, but we'll let other board members comment on it too.
I'll just say that my thought in moving that up is that's how most of the boards I've been a part of have done it, and that stems opportunities for argument or infighting with board members at the end of the meeting, and just focuses on what we're doing on each agenda item instead of going back after the discussion's been closed and rehashing previous agenda items, which had been happening at some of the meetings, which we're not supposed to be doing. So my thought in moving that up there is just to have an opportunity for whatever's on the mind of the board members to discuss that at that time. And then whenever the agenda items come up, obviously we have time to discuss them then. But that was my thought process last year, having that moved up.
Okay. And I'll explain, my thought process is only that, during this meeting, we had stuff come up that, that we may want to present next month, but we don't have a chance to do that because we don't have a time to comment. So that was my only suggestion, not public comment. You had mentioned public comment. I agree, public comment at the beginning, but I would just like the board comment to be at the end so we can recap, not go over anything we discussed prior that was on our agenda, but if something arose, that we could say we would like to have this placed on the agenda the next month. And that was my only thought. So, because we do hear comments from public, we have stuff that arises that we may want to bring up next month in a meeting, that we don't have a chance to discuss that anymore if we can't talk after the very beginning of the meeting. So that was my only thought.
I think it allows having it where it is still allows a board or a director of the board to bring up future board meetings, but it may set you back, well, you can always contact the board and have things added to an agenda prior to the next meeting anyway. So I would say that, the benefits, as Director Peters says, I think outweighs the timing of, when you would be able to, have that ability to put a, future board item on the agenda. But,
Yeah, if I may, Chairman, I think, and just personally, I understand completely where you're coming from, Director Griffin, but the opportunities that for miscommunication or for arguments that take place unnecessarily that I've seen in the past, I don't think outweigh, we have the opportunity under all the different agenda items to discuss further or to ask staff for further direction or clarification. So I'm personally in favor of leaving it where it's at, but those are my thoughts on it.
any other comments from other board members?
I do, I just can't get this thing turned on. There we go, finally turned on. So I don't speak up a whole lot here, but I do think that any opportunities that you all have to enlighten the public in your discussions is good. So I don't see, one of the issues that Director Griffin has brought up is, you basically have to have all your talking points with you if you're going to make your comments at the beginning of the meeting. And so it doesn't really give you an opportunity at the end of the meeting to, I guess, to voice any concerns possibly for future meetings, and for the public to know that you're thinking about these things. Because, one of the things, I'm on the PAC as well, and the PAC is filled with your community members. And, I think there's a real genuine concern that you all aren't having open, transparent conversations here on this board. They may be happening behind the scenes, but that they're not coming out here. And, I see Ms. Deckers at the podium, and she's on the PAC as well. So I just wanted to mention that the more opportunities you guys have to voice these concerns, not necessarily to have a discussion between yourselves, but also to let your constituents know that you understand those issues. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments from the board? Well, we'll take a moment here and then we'll go to public comment. Judy, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm actually standing here all this time because about 5 minutes ago, I thought you were calling for public comment. Tom, you said it 100% correctly. I congratulate you for doing that. I see no reason actually why you can't have both public and board comment at the beginning and end of the meeting. For all the reasons Tom mentioned. First of all, things come up. You may know ahead of time what you're going to be talking about, but members of the public don't have all the details, and sometimes it takes a bit of time to think it through. This isn't the U.S. Senate, the state Senate, it's not even Kern County Board of Supervisors. It's not even the City Council. If you truly want to have communication between the people that you are serving and yourselves and staff, I think you will think about having 2 public and board comments, periods. The public comment at the beginning of the meeting is for non-agenda items. And there are things that come up that I have often, and others here, have often wished to say, but by the end of the meeting, there is no longer a public comment period. And along the lines of Tom mentioning PAC, I would like to say as a PAC member, we worked very hard. It's immaterial that we did that because we volunteered to put together a revised version of the communication and engagement plan. We have yet seen any action taken on that plan. Are you going to do so? The other thing I want to say is, Jeff Simonetti, I congratulate Capitol Corps on their clear and succinct report that was in the board package. I read it, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. So I just want to be clear that we are discussing whether or not to move the board comments from the front of the meeting to the rear of the meeting. So I want to keep the topic strictly to that. So any other comments from the board?
Before we return to public comment, I just wanted to say that while I appreciate those comments, that's a perfect example of the issue that I see with this.
Right.
Because we start veering off topic, and while we're not the Board of Supervisors, the Senate, or any other body, we still are under the Brown Act of California, and we have to adhere to the items that are on this, or we are in violation of that Brown Act. So I think by having that in that order, and we do have an opportunity for the public and the board to comment on every single agenda item as we go along, but we're not allowed under the Brown Act of California to talk about non-agendized items.
Correct. And, you go to training on having organized meetings, and they give you reasons why it's important to put public comments in certain sections of the meeting and to be able to have a reasonable control of the meeting. So again, I recommend we stay with where the board comments are, and I welcome any other comments from the board. If not, I would say let's move on.
I just want to say thank you to Carol for bringing that up and trying to get a consensus or an idea. But I would urge you guys to at least consider it because there are several things that I think we learned during the meeting that, it could be a valuable asset, in my opinion.
Could I speak now? This is a public comment? That's what I thought you said. We're going to have comment.
John.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I'd like to speak about public comments. We don't have enough time to make public comments. That's the way it works. It's the same thing at the County Board of Supervisors. I think you gave 2 minutes to the folks that tried to come and talk to you about Dominion. I'm going to continue. The fascists are where I left off. The fascists are feeding at the trough. The game is rigged, and we're talking about comments here. and the speculators in California's
This-
water. No, I'm going to finish.
This isn't
I'm
a
gonna
general
fi-
public comment. This is public comment on the general manager's report.
Well, I'm gonna give a report on what's going on with state of water in this state and what you're ignoring, and that is.
Mr. Chair, I believe the member of the public is out of order on this.
Well, I think I'll take 2 more minutes, okay?
Mr. Sinat.
Mr. Attorney, no. I want to finish this. The LA Times is currently informing us that California's water rights laws are antiquated and racist. Okay? The state government promoted the extermination of native people to make way for white settlers. And today, the Indian tribes are meeting in Sacramento to discuss strategies toward watershed resilience in California's sacred waters. Space is limited to tribal leaders and federal state representatives.
Madam Clerk, could we
I'm
pause
almost
this time
done.
for just a second?
I'm
Mr.
almost
Snell,
done,
what does this
sir.
have to do with the monthly financial report or with the
It has
report on the
everything-
GA water
It has
market
everything to
report?
do with the monthly financial report. Because what you're doing is you're spending our money on this crap. Okay?
No,
I doubt
nothing you've said that has anything to do with this report.
Why don't you listen? Okay? It
Okay,
does.
well,
It does.
You're continuing on an article that you already spoke on another item, so I'm not sure how it has to do with both of
The
them.
financial report has everything to do with what I'm talking about.
Okay,
Because
go ahead.
that's why we're spending the money.
That's fine. Go
Okay.
ahead. Thank you.
This is important. The Indian tribes are in Sacramento right now discussing water resilience. And I'd like you to ask the tribes how they feel about the Department of Defense using a doctrine called Federal Reserve water rights as a legal strategy in confiscation of their Federal Reserve water rights, which is the essence of the legal doctrine in the first place. Does anybody here see the irony in this? I think Sigma should be canned. We have enough water if we build the reservoirs and the canals and stop flushing the water out into the ocean. And then we don't need all of these meetings and these public comments, and the state can pay for it like they were supposed to, and we'd be done with it.
Thank you, Carol, for the general manager's report. And
That
with that,
concludes my report. Thank you.
this date of the next, item number 15, date of the next meeting will be May 10th, 2023. And with that, this meeting is adjourned at 10:51.